Welcome to the MindSolve podcast. I'm Dr. Jonathan, your host. The topic of this episode is Demystifying Eating Disorders, a Pathway to Recovery. In this episode, we will discuss the inspiring narrative of Sarah Lee's journey as a certified eating disorder coach and her incredible work to help people who live with eating disorders on the pathway to recovery. Sarah is a friend of 13 years, a former professional financial services colleague that I've worked with, and I've grown to really build a strong bond with over the years. So I'm so happy to have this conversation with you, Sarah. So with that, I want to welcome Sarah. But before we get into some specific prepared questions, I want to give Sarah an opportunity to first provide an overview of how she decided to become a certified eating disorder coach and some of the outstanding background elements that brought her to this place in her journey. So with that, Sarah, welcome.
My goodness, Dr. Jonathan, thank you for having me. It is such an honor to be on your podcast and just providing me a platform to share my story and my passion work that I now do. So, going back in time, throughout my 20s, I struggled with an eating disorder. Specifically, I was diagnosed with bulimia. Back then, which is the early 2000s, if you had any reoccurring pattern of purging, you were diagnosed with bulimia. Fast forward to today, just to kind of give some context for your audience, the definitions for the different diagnoses have expanded. So I may have been diagnosed today with anorexia binge purge subtype. So what that means back in my 20s is I had a high level of restriction with my food. And then I would go through, we'll call it episodes of binging and purging. I was very high achieving, high functioning, if you will. And it was a secret. Nobody knew that I struggled. My body never got, as I do air quotes, too thin where people thought I looked sick. Actually, on the contrary, I would receive compliments all the time. You look great. How do you stay so thin? All of these type of comments that really just rooted me deeper and deeper into my eating disorder. And I was around year 7 in my eating disorder where I started to have some health complications. Now, I will say that it had to be everything but my eating disorder. I was in this complete denial, meaning maybe it's IBS, maybe it's my thyroid, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And when I say health problems, it was more of a lot of digestive type problems I was struggling with. I was always cold, fatigued, had headaches. So nothing that was, I would say, maybe on the severe side, but nuisance, frustrations, not feeling my best. And I had a really scary moment, JB, where I had gone to an amusement park over the summer and Six Flags of Texas. And it was in the Texas heat, riding roller coasters. I had not really eaten very much about 2 days leading up to this because I knew at Six Flags I was going to probably have food that I saw as bad and go over a certain calorie intake because, my son at the time was 6, so I wanted to have funnel cake with him. And so I had saved up. So my body was lacking a lot of nutrition. I was out in the Texas heat. I had at one point in my mind too much funnel cake. So I knew when I got home that was not going to stay in my body. And I ended up passing out in my bathroom. And my son, and I always get choked up with this, JB, so I apologize. You know me, I am an emotional type person anyways. But I passed out in my bathroom, and my son whose name is Bruce Lee. He had these little glasses. He was 6 years old. He found me. And I had come to in my bathroom, and he was leaning over me, and his glasses were all fogged up. I still remember it like it was yesterday. His little glasses were all fogged up, and he said, "Mommy, are you okay?" And I'm just going to get graphic. So if anyone's triggered, I'm putting a trigger warning out there for you right now. I felt vomit on the side of my mouth. And I remember wiping it off, and I passed out again. I came to, and the man I was in a relationship at the time with, my son went and got him. And he picked me up off the floor and took me to the emergency room. Even he didn't know exactly what was going on with me. So in the emergency room, JB, I was horrified. Like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to find out. They're going to figure this out in the hospital that I am struggling with an eating disorder. My son's father is going to find out. What is that going to mean? And the next day, I was supposed to catch a flight to go to Arizona for a huge corporate meeting with the bank I was working at the time. And I was like, how am I going to be able to go to this meeting? Like, just everything in my head, I was like, wow. So that, they kept me overnight. And the next day I was at home by myself in a dark house, and I dropped to my knees. And for the first time in my life, I didn't really know what I believed, to be honest with you. But for the first time in my life, I was like, God, if you're there, I need help. I can't do this on my own. And I felt a peace come over me, JD, and I pulled myself off the ground, went to my computer, and I started searching for help. And I didn't know what that was going to mean. Would I have to go away? What's going to happen? And I found an amazing therapist. She had a very just simple website, nothing like too flashy or whatever, but I was so drawn to her. And she had this little office outside of her, like on the side of her house. And wow. I just knew this was my person. I just knew. And that's when I went into therapy. And I started pursuing recovery, and I was able to overcome my overt behaviors, specifically the binging and purging. I negotiated with restriction. I was like, okay, I'll move calories up a little bit more. It took me a little bit more time to let go of that piece. And I saw her for about like a year, and everybody's timelines are different with this. But then I went the rest of the way on my own with repairing body image specifically, which took me years. But I had enough in therapy where, I went into therapy thinking, just stop the binging and purging and I'll be fine. And little did I realize that I needed to let go of control. I needed to heal some trauma in my life that I didn't even realize was trauma. I just was like, oh, that happened to me. Like, I moved on, I'm stronger for it. But there was some trauma I had to heal. There was some belief systems I needed to heal. So just a lot came out. And 10 years after this, I'm strong in my recovery. As you know, because we worked together, I was in the world of banking, held many leadership positions. Literally, I think maybe a handful of people in my life even knew that I'd had an eating disorder and I recovered. Sometimes I would talk about it here and there. I actually remember talking about it with you at one time after like a company dinner or something. We were just having a friendly conversation. But it was just a thing in my past, JB. And then after my mom passed away at 61 years old, she always had struggled with food and body. I don't know if she had an eating disorder. Don't know. But it was about a year after that, 10 years in my recovery, I felt a calling out of nowhere that said, Sarah, it's time for you to go help other girls and women break free. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, how in the world am I going to do that? You know, and with some research, some divine intervention, I figured it out. I figured out a way. I dove into the world of mental health and certifications. At this time, coaching was just a new thought in the eating disorder recovery world. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there about it. So, fast forward, I have 4 coaching certifications. I've been in private practice now
Mm,
for 8 years. I have helped
outstanding.
girls and women around the world.
Mm,
And I'm just so fortunate that I feel I could use my pain and a time in my life that was very difficult to now help other people. It's a true
yeah.
blessing. And this work truly for me is just passion. I dive into people's story, and I know we're going to talk about exactly what coaching is, but I just dive all in and I give my all. And if I can just, I remember going into it and I said, if I can just save one person, I'll be happy. And here we are, hundreds later.
Yeah. Whew. Wow, Sarah. You started with the word passion, and that came all the way through. I just want to say, before we get into more specific information, I am so proud to be your friend. I'm so honored to be your friend. And, your story, I can see it, the way you gave vivid and detailed and very vulnerable disclosure about what your experience was in that moment when your son coming in the bathroom and finding you, and how you really galvanize your sense of faith. I know you're a very faith grounded person, and allowing yourself to use all your resources to research, finding a therapist, right? That's courageous. Every time I hear someone say, I went and found a therapist, my heart just warms, right? Because I know that that's the healing profession that we look forward to those opportunities. So, um, and you mentioned the trauma, right? Acknowledging without stigma that there was things in your family of origin that you recognize, um, with your mother and other things that are going on. So thank you for being so honest and open about that. I want to take this moment now before we get into our questions. We have some great questions we're going to go through. Is to make sure that I level set for someone who might be listening and wondering, wow, it's so hard to navigate. What is an eating disorder? And like you described, and over time, the definitions have changed. As the DSM-5, which I'm going to lay out a little bit more specifically, literally, I'm going to read it so others can understand where we're coming from. And recognizing that eating disorders are a place of harm that requires healing, requires professionals like yourself to really help and guide and support people to a journey of recovery and health and wellness. So, what I want to share first is, as we know from a contextual standpoint, this comes directly from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And this is the latest version, the one that we use today in the field of the profession of therapy. As a brief definition, it states eating disorders are feeding and eating disorders are characterized by a persistent disturbance of eating or eating related behaviors that results in altered consumption or absorption of food, and that significantly impairs physical health or psychosocial functioning, including disorders of pica, rumination disorder, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And some of these disorders I know from working with patients and clients can be a specifier or comorbid with other disorders as well. So it's not always showing up in the lives of people as a singular disorder. It could be, coupled with depression, anxiety, trauma, and other things that are impacting lives. So I know that you work with other professionals and you collaborate. We talked about that. You're really great about collaborating with other professionals and seeing the whole person. I know that about you from prior to you joining this profession as a profession in the financial services. You were always thoughtful about taking great care of people that you led, coached, and developed in your career. So with that, I want to transition and get into some of the questions we have prepared. And Sarah, I'd like for you to start with helping people who are like new to this, understanding they're listening. Maybe there's someone listening right now thinking, I need help. I understand, I can appreciate and relate to Sarah's story. And what is an eating disorder recovery coach? And how do I find a person who does that kind of work? So, talk about that and defining it for those who may not be as aware.
Okay. Yes. And one thing you just pointed out that's a great
Mhm,
segue into answering this question is coaching is a powerful adjunct to the treatment
mhm,
team. Eating
mhm,
disorders are very complex illnesses, and it usually takes a team to
mhm,
help someone recover and be along that journey. And as you pointed out to Dr. Jonathan, there are usually co-occurring. So like for me, since I've been
mhm,
pretty transparent about my story so far, I also struggled with a certain type of OCD
mhm,
and generalized anxiety. So there were three
mhm,
pieces of my puzzle that all deserve
mhm,
help. Um,
mhm,
so, as a coach, one of the best ways to describe my role is I really work on the how and the now in changing the actual behaviors. So, I am more focused on, for instance, if someone is sharing with me something of their past, obviously I'm going to
mhm,
allow space for that,
mhm,
understanding, empathy. But what I want to do is bring that into the present. How does
mhm,
that impact your relationship with food today? How is that impacting your thoughts around your body and how you see
mhm,
yourself today? And then what are the behaviors resulting from those thoughts? Are we restricting? Are we binging and purging? Are
mhm,
we excessively exercising? Are we taking um, laxatives or enemas, or there's a lot of different things that can be in play. So I'm looking at, okay, so here's the thoughts, here's the beliefs. How do we work on those? And then how do those impact your actual behaviors that are driving the eating disorder? So as a coach, I'm jumping in to say, okay, now how do we make goals together that are going to with baby steps help you move this process forward in your recovery. So many people will talk about, I love my therapist.
mhm,
The sessions are so good, I get so much out of it, but then I leave,
mhm,
right? Or dietitians sometimes aren't always the most favorite in the eating disorder world, but even with dietitians, they can say, I really like my dietitian. I trust the plan that she has me on, but I just can't follow through.
mhm,
Or on the opposite, they don't really care for their dietitian. Why? Because they're really incorporating a healthy mindset with food and they need
mhm,
help grasping that piece of the puzzle. That's where the coach comes
mhm,
in. I can
mhm,
take the parts that we're working on in therapy in with the dietitian and put goals to those and say, okay, we're going to do these together. You're no longer alone in between sessions. Not only are we going to meet, and that could be a mixture of talk sessions about what happened last week. What do we want to work on this week? It could be just real life. It could be exposure where I'm eating with somebody. We're looking at
mhm.
fears head on. I've gone grocery shopping, which I do with people because all
Wow.
listen, the eating disorder is going to show up as soon as food shows up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whether that's the grocery store, a restaurant, eating even foods that may feel safe, but maybe they're afraid of that feeling of being too full or getting like out of control. Um, so it could be the exposure piece too, is what I'm saying. It
Yeah.
could be exposure, it could be talk. We're setting the goals. They have access to me in between their sessions. So in real time, via text message, they can text
Mm,
me and I'm in it with them to help them overcome those
mhm,
real moments. I've literally got texts of, right now I have an urge to purge, Sarah, and I don't want to help me. And really just, someone may say, now, Sarah, how in the world do you do that? How do you respond to everybody
mhm,
so
mhm,
quickly? Well, one thing I do is I do limit the number of people I work with at one time, because if I'm going to do it at the
Yeah.
level I want to do it, and be
Yeah.
accessible and build relationships with each person, I couldn't have like this huge amount of clients, right? So it's really, I limit that to a numbers that feel good for me at any given time. And then so much about it is reaching out and doing something different, right?
Mm,
I bet you can like back me up on this. It's about
mm,
changing the neuro pathways and doing something different. Okay, I feel the urge, I feel the compulsion, instead of just giving right in and having no
mm,
space for additional
mm,
thought or challenging. Um, I'm going to text Sarah. I'm going to do something
mm,
different. So even if I can't respond to someone right away, and I'm a very responsive person, that has not changed from the years we worked together, Jamie. But even if I can't respond
mm,
right away, I'm with family, I'm sleeping, whatever, them doing something different starts to
mm.
change the patterns, right?
Yeah.
Um, so really, I think it's the now and the how where the coach is the
Mm,
powerful adjunct. And not only do I have the certifications and training to do the work, JB, I get it. I've been there. And while,
mm,
each person can experience an eating disorder differently, and I always tell people, listen, I
mm,
know a lot. I've been through the
mm.
journey too, but you're going to teach me how you experience an eating disorder.
Yes.
You're going to
Yeah.
teach me how it impacts your life. And together, I'm in
Mm,
this with you. And so having that lived experience gives so much space for relatability. It brings down the shame walls. They
mm,
know I'm not judging them. They can tell me anything, and they know it's not going to shock me. I can be in it with them in the moment and understand.
mm,
So it provides hope, it provides
mm,
patience, it provides motivation just to know, like, hey, Sarah has been through this and she is fully free.
mm.
Maybe I can do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So there's a constellation here of wonderful things you said. I'm connecting all the stars of it and aligning it, and I really resonate with the how and now, right? Because that's mindfulness based. It's present. It's being here, being in this moment. I see that as a fantastic way of how you're helping your clients, and for someone who's listening and thinking, "Who do I need a certified eating disorder coach?" This gives them some evidence of what that could feel like for them to work with someone like yourself, who's compassionate and caring. That is really powerful. And then when you talked about thoughts and beliefs and behaviors, because beliefs typically determine behaviors, is that helping the client patient develop collaborative work on their goals and acknowledging with some awareness and acceptance of what's going on without judging themselves. Again, that's very mindfulness based, which I appreciate hearing you talk about that. And the exposure, like really doing the walk with them, that sitting beside them empathetically, walking beside them empathetically in the grocery store, at a restaurant, right? You said the eating disorder shows up wherever food shows up. So it's omnipresent when it comes to food. And acknowledging that hope is a real driver to resist the stigma and the shame, to say there is more to come for me. I'm in this moment, but there's more to come for me with the healing. So I like what you said about how your approach comes to life, and I imagine that it varies by different coaches. Your style is very tailored to you. You see the whole person. And one other point before I go to the next question is, I want listeners to understand that what you said is so critical about the partnership and the collaboration you do with therapists and with dietitians, nutritionists that work with meal planning, because it's not a competition. It's a collaboration. It's a cooperation of professionals working together. And it's okay to talk to your therapist and ask them, he or she, to give a release of information, right? To
Yes.
share with you, to partner with you so that you can do the
Yes.
kind of great work that you're doing to help. So
Yes.
wonderfully said,
I
Sarah. I really
oftentimes
appreciate that.
I will say, like, I want to make the job of the therapist and the dietitian easier. I want to make their job easier. I want to collaborate with them, because one of the biggest frustrations, as you may know as a therapist, is like, I see this person, we had a great session, and then I don't have the time or the bandwidth, or even because of regulation, to interact with them at the level they need in between sessions. And that's where I come in. And that collaboration is critical. So many of the clients that come my way, JB, are referrals from therapists and dietitians who have worked with me and said, a coach would be really good for you. Call Sarah Lee.
The best way to operate. Fantastic. Wow. So I want to go to the next question, and I'd like you to talk about, what are some of the typical eating disorder myths that the general population should be mindful of?
Yes. Five really come to mind as the top ones. And so I'll go through those. Number one is that eating disorders are not that serious. They could even be like a vanity issue, not that serious. And here's the reality. Anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder, with exception to opioid overdose. So anorexia is a leader in this. It is very serious. The second myth is it's just about food. It's just about food. And while there can be a great fixation on food, exercise, calories, weight, shape, the reality is eating disorders are rooted in biological, psychological, and a lot of social culture type causes. So it's not just about the food. Eating disorders are a female illness. They just affect females. No, we are actually seeing rates for all genders for men rising. A recent study done maybe like a year or so ago saw that 10 to 25% of those affected by eating disorders are men. Are men. Wow. So, that is definitely a myth. And I mean, eating disorders do significantly impact women. That is true. But we can't neglect that it's impacting others as well. Another myth, eating disorders just develop in the teenage years. It's a teenager, adolescent problem. Yes, is the adolescent stage is there's a vulnerability there for a lot of different reasons. So yes, that's true. But you know what we're seeing? I just did another podcast not too long ago talking about this, that there are other periods of time where there's vulnerability. It could be when trauma happens. It could be major life events, but also postpartum. So that's when my eating disorder developed after I had my son, postpartum. And number two, which might mind blow everybody here, is perimenopause. We are seeing more and more women, JB, in their 40s developing eating disorders. So this whole idea is just a teenage thing is not true. And what that does is it can cause more embarrassment and shame, because people that maybe develop it later in life or feel like it was kind of there as an adolescent, but it's grown and grown, they don't want to seek help because they're ashamed. And then the fifth one, which is also a big one, only people who are very thin have an eating disorder. It's not true. The majority of people who have an eating disorder are not, quote unquote, very thin. The majority. Yeah. So, we have been fed certain images, and growing up, I remember back to school little specials, after school specials, excuse me.
I remember those very well.
You may remember those. Karen Carpenter was the first one, as a celebrity who got attention of what is this eating disorder? And so while there can be a look of emaciation, very thin.
Yeah.
That does not mean someone isn't suffering if they don't look like that.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. All five of those are really important. Thank you for taking us through that. I do want to pull on the thread of one that I have seen research too, that male gender persons are experiencing more eating disorders than being recognized or reported. And the prevalence might be off because there's this sense that men may not know, or male gendered people may not know in the way that they can disclose. And they just see it as that I just got to go to the gym and keep working harder, right? I got to get
Right.
leaner. I got to get more lean
That's right.
muscle. I'm wondering if you've encountered any clients that have been faced with that kind of challenge and dynamic.
Yeah. So personally, in my practice, I primarily
Mhm,
see those that identify as females.
mhm,
However, I have a vast network of coaches. So I understand that men also struggle, as I just stated, and they deserve help too.
mhm,
But what happens is what you're talking about is they may not even connect the dots that
mhm,
something like that's happening for them. But specifically with binge eating and bulimia,
mhm,
the rates continue to go up. And those that
mhm.
are also transgender and part of the
Yeah.
LGBTQ community, there
Mhm,
is also anorexia along with the others that is, those rates are going up. So this is a real problem. And I think men can kind of push it away. Let me go to the gym, let me get leaner, but there can still be a great deal of body dysmorphia.
mhm.
In my also with the men part, JB, while I was in my eating disorder, I purposely, it was kind of subconscious to be blunt with you, but I had two major relationships during my time of my eating disorder, and both were bodybuilders,
Oh,
legit bodybuilders
wow.
in my 20s. And I think I was attracted to that because, and maybe some females will resonate with this, but they made me feel small. I felt
Oh,
small when I was next to them, which gave
wow.
me some sense of I felt good.
Mhm,
Also, they had certain eating habits that allowed me secretly to get away with my eating habits.
mhm,
Both of them were very strict and rigid in their
mhm,
patterns and
mhm,
behaviors because that's what is required. But then they would have
mhm,
cheat days.
mhm.
Looking back on that now with all that I know, that was the restrict binge cycle. So, for
Yeah.
men specifically, to go back to this, if you are buying into that notion of super strict and rigid 6 days a week, and then you get a cheat day, there could be a psychological component going on, JB, that just deserves some help. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent. I didn't expect to go there, but you asked, and I just think men
Mhm,
are underreporting. They're not necessarily putting those pieces together for themselves, not seeing that there could be an issue, and
mhm.
there most certainly can be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you touched on it, and I wanted to make sure we didn't skip past that because you're right. I know you work primarily with female gendered persons, and male gendered persons sometimes get left out of the conversation because we don't have some of the same social stigmas with body shape and eating patterns and so forth. But it's there and it's under the surface. And I also want to acknowledge and appreciate, with regard to you allowing your own subconscious mind to rise to the consciousness and share that, right? To say, hey, I had some experience with dating and I realized that that's what I was doing, right? And maybe it was intuitive and instinctive at the time, yet you recognize and you can reflect on it. So, really great insight, which leads me to my next question, which is a really provocative one, is how has diet culture influenced the risks that can lead to eating disorders? Because we're at the early part of the year, and we end the year, or in the beginning of the year, there's a lot of volume pushed out there to say, hey, this is a time to be new year, new me. And diet culture kind of plays into that.
Oh my goodness, yes. And we are in that time of year where we're being bombarded with the messaging. For those listening, I first just want to start off with, if you've never heard what diet culture is before, what exactly is it? Diet culture is really a set of belief systems in our society that prioritizes thinness as the objective with health and beauty. This oftentimes puts moral values on the body and food, such as good and bad food. It also really neglects the genetic component of diversity in body shapes and sizes. So it also deteriorates health in many ways. So diet culture specifically, the word diet, JB, we can talk about how that word's hardly even used anymore. Like, people don't really say anymore, I'm on a diet. It's almost like this thing of the past taboo. We now put labels on it such as lifestyle, the way I eat. There are like now different categories of how you eat. Is it vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, gluten-free? There's all these like the ones that have kind of survived a little bit as far as they were diets and somehow they've been embraced as like lifestyles, or more the low carb ones like keto, for example. It was a diet, but because of how it was marketed, it turned into like a lifestyle. So I just wanted to like set the stage for that first, that, how we're looking at it now, it's still diet culture, even though we're not calling these things a diet like they once were. How do they impact? Well, we're sending the message, right, of you're healthy, you're happy, you're loved, you're at a higher standard in society, you're attractive, you're sexy, you're all these things if you look a certain way.
Yeah.
And it neglects the psychological piece. It neglects the health piece. Now, there are pieces of the puzzle now, and I don't know if you've heard of this term, but it's called orthorexia. Orthorexia is not in the DSM-5, let me be clear, but really what it is, it's the pursuit of health in an unhealthy way. That's where we're like saying, this is healthy, I only want to eat healthy, I only want to eat organic, I'm going to eliminate all these kind of things at the price of your overall well-being. That's not health.
That's scary. Yeah.
Right? It's where you isolate. You don't want to go out with people. You're afraid of ingredients. True health, positive nutrition and health is pursuing a healthy body because you want to thrive in life. It's pursuing health in a way where you have some flexibility and you can enjoy food and socially, and you're not driven by fear. So, I had the belief system, and some of us are just more sensitive for various reasons. There's, back in the old days, the miners would take canaries down in the coal mine with them.
Yeah.
And if the canaries, died, they knew that's not a safe place to go. It's almost like those of us, or those that are currently struggling, are the more sensitive canaries of what is happening in our society and culture, JB. So many people struggle with food and body. And this has been around forever in Western society. And depending on the decade we're in, depends on the way you should look. And there's always something new. Right now, GLP-1s are hot. And there are some studies that show like some positive pieces of the puzzle that are happening. We still have a lot to learn. But let me tell you what's in my Instagram feed right now. I'll have, because I'm connected with a lot of eating disorder people and helpers in the recovery community, I'll have like pro recovery. And then I had to add just this morning from a company saying, and the ad was around, I just want to lose 15 pounds. but I couldn't get approved for GLP-1 because my BMI was too low, but this company did it. Just for grins, I decided to click on this thing, and there's a quiz right there. I'm like, let me just see. I'm going to pretend I do these kind of things, JB, because I want to know what's going on and what my clients and people struggling are facing. I took this little quiz that was 6 questions, answered honestly, besides the part of I want to lose weight. That was not honest, but it gave me congratulations. You qualify for a GLP-1. So when you ask me the question around how is diet culture impacting eating disorders, the numbers don't lie. They're going up, up, up. Our health in America specifically going down, 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 down. This isn't a solution. It's not matching. And we're all trying to figure it out, right? I think people are trying to figure out, like, what is health? How do we get healthy? Restricting, doing things to the body when you're not also working on the mind, the heart, the spirit, the soul, does not work.
Yeah. So that's a great segue for me to go in deeper with you on this, because you touched on a lot of important points. So some might argue like GLP-1 can help me because I'm diabetic. I'm struggling with my weight. I'm at a weight size that's risky, so my doctor's recommending it, or it's a part of a plan. Some might say, well, I am a bodybuilder and I do want to do the very strict regimen of eating, and that's helping me build more muscle, and I'm dropping fat, and I'm doing all these things. And then you've got another domain of diet culture that comes, or I should say within the scope of diet culture, because not all this is specific to diet, but it's relative, right? That social media is such a powerful force. You and I know that. We get information out to people who need to reach us, and we learn, like you say. You go out and you experiment. You're curious. You're seeing, what does it feel like for somebody who goes to these different channels of social media? And there's so much information flooding around body image and diet and what are good or bad foods, versus saying, when I talk with clients and patients, I talk about higher nutrient versus higher energy foods, right? So it's not about good or bad food. It's that some foods will give you a lot of energy that, you may not utilize it all in the moment that you take it into your system. And some foods are a little more higher nutrient that may take longer to process, and you may utilize it in your body differently than maybe the next person, but that doesn't make it good or bad, right? It's about understanding your whole system. So
Right.
I wonder, when you do receive clients or patients, or you even see people who are in the field, how do you deal with resistance when they're struggling with that idea that you're telling them that that's not healthy for your body overall? What are some of the things that you find that has helped you deal with that resistance?
I joke, JB, that I have learned to dance with resistance. There is power in resistance. When someone is resisting something, there is some sort of like, no, I can't let go of this, or no, I can't do this. There's something driving the resistance. So as a practitioner, not seeing resistance as like, oh, I can't get through to this person, they're not listening. It's more about like, getting curious, what's happening for them, and approaching it without any judgment. Like, I have the belief system now in a very healthy place in my life that there's all different kinds of ways to eat. There's different cultures, there's different celebrations, there's different needs that our body has. And that's very unique to preference in the body and all, so I don't have a judgment on a preferred way to eat if it's promoting a healthy lifestyle and well-being.
Yes.
If you're approaching exercise, for example, from a place of, this makes me feel more confident and good in my body, that's a very healthy place to be. So when I look at coming back to resistance, having that piece up front of no judgment and open-mindedness, there's lots of ways to eat and be in your body, has to be up front. And then work with someone with where they're at, JB. Like if,
Yes.
I remember in my own journey, like I was like, okay, yes, I will really work hard on the binging and purging piece, but this whole thing about giving up counting calories, that scares me. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to do that
Mm-hmm.
because that feels way out of control. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
my therapist didn't force that with me. She
Mm-hmm.
met me where I was at. We
Mm-hmm.
worked on the compulsions, the emotions, the thoughts driving my other behaviors. And then slowly, as I began to trust myself, guess what happened, JV? I started to let go of resistance.
Yeah.
So I take that same learning experience into my clients, with my
Mm-hmm.
clients. And when they are resistant to doing something, well, tell me how that shows up for you. Tell me why that part feels like the part you don't want to lay down, the part you're fearful of. What will happen if we did this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I personally find, especially with eating disorders, so much of it is a piece of the puzzle where I'm afraid of losing control or giving up control,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when we feel like we are in control of something, even though many times that's a myth, we're really not in control of much. But when we feel like we're in control of something, it makes us feel safe.
Exactly.
So,
Safety.
really, resistance when we're just pulling it back is this need to feel like I'm safe.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful answer. And I appreciate the point about safety as a landing spot because and the work that we both do, right? In different aspects. That's something I have found professionally is the helping of understanding that everything starts with safety first. And then from there, you build on your capabilities to expand your containment of doing something new or different that might feel divergent from what you've done in the past. And recognizing that this is a delicate topic, right? Because, you know, we live in a world, particularly Western civilization, that how we present physically gets taken as the first and maybe only opportunity of how others will receive us or not receive us. And that is hard. That's painful sometimes. It can be a real dangerous, slippery slope of trying to fit into a box or to an image of what others might receive us as versus being our authentic selves. And the work you're doing is helping people heal, be their authentic self, really love the body they occupy, which is a really special thing to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
when you're embodied and you can,
mhm,
it doesn't mean you look at your body. People will ask me this: So, Sarah, do you just love your body now? Here's the reality: I still have days where I'm uncomfortable
mhm,
in my body, but it's
mhm.
just part of the human experience. You're
It
not
is
just going to
truly.
be every day like, woohoo,
Yeah.
I love this body. And there's different
Mhm,
phases of life that you
mhm,
have to adjust to. It's about
mhm.
listening to the body, being
Yeah,
like, this is a
definitely.
gift that my soul lives in. How do
Mhm,
I best care for her? And that doesn't mean it has to be perfect every day.
mm, mhm.
But how do I care for her? How do I strive for that in a
Yeah,
way that feels good?
yeah. You kind of answered this question, so I'm still gonna go into a little piece of it. Is that struggle for someone who may be unsure? So maybe there's somebody out there listening, thinking, gosh, this is a lot of great information that I need to ponder and wonder if I should seek some help, right? And you talked about your journey. What do you recommend to someone who is really unsure about even taking a chance on seeking help? What's the pathway for them to start that first step? What would you say?
Yeah. I think the first step really is just acknowledging, hey, does food in my body, does it feel like it takes up a lot of thought and energy in a way
Mhm,
that doesn't feel good to me? Is
mhm,
at the very least, is my critical self, right? Because maybe someone's like, well, I don't think I have an eating disorder, but maybe the
mhm,
critical self is very harsh when it looks at your physical appearance. Perhaps you go
mhm,
through cycles of, okay, I'm going to eat like this and I'm going to be good. I'm going to be
mhm,
healthy. And then, like, you feel like something happens and my clients will often call this, and it's so interesting, right, JB, when numerous people say the same things and none of these people know each other, but they
Mm-hmm.
say the exact things over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So many of my clients will call it, some say the full word, but F it mode.
Mm.
That's what they'll say over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
F it mode. So what are we
Mm-hmm.
saying F it to? Right? Are we saying F it to the emotion, to society, to
Mm-hmm.
standards, to a perceived way you think you should be eating, and it takes you in a place where you just decide to eat everything to a point of uncomfortability? So my first piece of advice is just to really get honest about your own thoughts and behaviors with food.
Mm-hmm.
And with eating disorders specifically, another thing I hear over and over again is, I don't think I'm sick enough.
Oh.
Guess what? With an eating disorder, you will never be sick enough.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
I have literally been side by side with one client coming to my mind right now, holding her hand in an emergency room. She's turning yellow because of jaundice. And she says, Sarah, I'm not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
You will never be sick enough. People will think, well, I'm not in a thin body. I'm not sick enough. So my point is that thought resonates for most people that have an eating disorder, no matter where you are on the continuum.
Right.
If you are struggling with food and body in any way, you deserve help. You
Yes.
deserve help. So that first step is getting on Google, right? And eating disorder recovery. You can go to some of the main resources, such as the National Eating Disorder Association website, also known as NEDA. If you Google anything around eating disorders, they'll be one of the first that actually populate and pop up. So just do some research. There's some great things out there that may lead someone to saying, yeah, I deserve some help. And there are so many therapists and dietitians and
Yes.
coaches that are doing such great work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have the privilege that as you were just talking, I was thinking of some great professionals that I've worked with that I still have collaboration with who really specialize working with eating disorders as licensed marriage family therapists, licensed clinical social workers, nutritionist, dietitian. I have you as my great friend. And I know you're based in Texas, so it's yeah, but you work internationally, right? You help people across the globe and you've done
Yes.
some incredible work already. So it's good to know that you're never going to be sick enough is a way for someone to sit there with hearing you say that to understand that, okay, I don't need to be at an imminent threat of life to seek help. And they deserve help, is what you said. And I agree with that wholeheartedly because healing, learning, and growing is part of the human experience. And that's a wonderful way for people to see their opportunities to seek help. So I want to take our last few minutes that we have here, Sarah, is have you just take a moment to get some final insights, thoughts, or any contact information, how people can reach and find you, if they want to learn more about the work you're doing, Sarah Lee Recovery, and the great opportunities to continue to learn from you.
Again, passion was where we started this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure I've gotten passionate a number of times and gone off on tangents. So I really hope all the information, I'm kind of sitting here like, what have I even said? But I hope that someone, even one person, once again, can take away from our episode and seek out help. What I want to say that's so important is to remember it's not just about food. It's not just about your body. There's other pieces of the puzzle going on. And until you understand the value inside, you are never going to see the value outside, no matter
Yes.
what you do. And so this road to recovery from an eating disorder, there is resistance, there is ambivalence, there is fear. So many people start their journey like, I'm not sure I want to do this. But I want to tell you, if you are listening to my voice right now, it is worth it.
Yes.
It is so much better on this side. You can have a life full of love and purpose, and that doesn't mean life doesn't get lifey. That doesn't mean, you're not going to have challenges. But what it means is you're going to show up with the tools and understanding to navigate those pieces of your life without harming yourself.
Yes.
And that's huge.
Wow. Sarah, thank you. Well said. And you did share a great deal of information in quality and in quantity of helping others learn from you. And I really appreciate you giving me this precious gift of your time to connect and share with the listeners of the MindSoft podcast. So thank you. First and foremost, thank you for this privilege. And I
Thank you.
continue
And
to,
I didn't answer, by the way, JB, how people can find me. I know I forget me. Like I'm thinking about everybody else. But
yeah.
Sarah Lee Recovery is my website. I'm on most social handles too. They can find me.
Mhm.
And I want to, reiterate something, even if like my caseload is full, or if I'm not the
Mhm.
right fit for you for some reason, or you're a man who listened to this and said, where do I start? I need some
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. That's a good
Reach
point.
out to me. Reach
Mhm.
out to me. I have I'm one of they call me the OG of coaching. Like I have been doing this for a while, so I know lots of people,
Mhm.
and I will match make a way. I will find
Mhm.
you someone to walk beside you and help you. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. I do that all the time, JB, just because I want people to get the help
Mhm.
they deserve.
Yeah, yeah. And I will include that information when we publish this episode. So thank you for making sure we didn't miss that. And it's sarahleerecovery.com. Right. So I want to be clear on that. All right. And male gendered persons, you're welcome to reach out to Sarah as well and let her know that you need some guidance to be match made and find someone who might be able to help you. So, with that, again, Sarah, I wanted to end on a note of just thanking you for your passion as a human being, right? Human being, not human doing. You're living it through and through, helping people recover and find their way. And I want to invite all of our listeners to if you've heard this episode on your preferred platform or you're watching the YouTube channel for MindSoft, to like it, share it with others you think might benefit from the information, and continue to focus on overall wellness. That's the message here that I'm hoping that you gather from Sarah's great sharing of recovery and the pathway to do it the right way, the healthy way. So with that, be mindful and choose joy. Thank you.